Thank you. That was an amazing panel. I love the energy in the room. We got to move things along. We got a packed day, packed afternoon. Next, we're going to dive into another vertical topic of AI. Like all technologies, there is a bit of a Faustian bargain. It giveth, it taketh away. There's amazing potential, and there's also risks and ethics to be involved. So I am going to hand it over to Eric Horvitz, Chief Scientific Officer at Microsoft. Wow. To lead a panel on this amazing topic and introduce the experts, and also maybe let a patient voice lead off as well. Take it away, Eric.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. Well, welcome to the panel on Promise to Practice, Navigating AI's Potential to Enhancing Patient-Centered Care. You know, there's lots of excitement right now, and as well as understandable anxiety about applications of artificial intelligence in medicine. These tools are starting to show some real promise for being able to assist patients as well as clinicians with improving healthcare, providing fast-paced access to information, doing diagnosis and care planning. You know, at the same time, there are important concerns and challenges that need to be navigated. Questions of privacy, transparency, equity and trust. How do we ensure the accuracy and safety of these systems? Also, there's also a worry that automation could come to insert itself and displace rather than support direct clinician analysis as well as patient-clinician engagement. So today's discussion will explore these opportunities, the tensions that are rising in reality and in minds, and just questions about how patients and clinicians can navigate together the present and future of AI in healthcare. And in all of this, it's really vital to keep in mind that patients and patient communities are really key stakeholders in all of this. Not only to understand the potential and the benefits as well as the risks, but also to help to shape how these technologies will come to be used over the next decade and then 2 decades to come. So to get us started, we want to first hear patient perspectives. Where are our patient representatives? Are you waving? Okay, let's, can I hand someone the microphone?
Shamika, here.
Oh, all I saw was a cell phone in front of your face. I didn't know you actually. Okay.
Yes, my name is Shamika Marty, and I am a patient advocate. I have 15 different autoimmune conditions, and I advocate for chronic illness.
Any question or comment about the situation?
I would like to know, being, with Microsoft, what type of technologies, and I go to definitely a lot of different conferences, but the only thing is I see these new technologies that are coming out, but none of the things are being implemented. I'm in hospitals all the time. So what are the barriers that are happening that are not implementing all of this wonderful technology, and what can we do to advance that?
So your question is very interesting in that it's angled towards excitement and promise and like hands on hips. Where is this stuff?
Yes.
As opposed to saying, well, hang on and hold off. This is scaring me, which is interesting. All I can say is I'll make a quick comment, but I think we can come back to that in our discussion later, in that if you told me it was 2025 and my PhD work in 1988 had not shipped widely because I was doing incredible work in AI and medicine back then, I would just be stunned. So there are questions about the fusion of technology for good and bad reasons why it's so slow sometimes. Let me just say that some technologies have been like wildfire, like the ambient AI for recording patient clinician encounters, making it easier for clinicians to have notes and for patients to have those notes as well. And I mean, the promise there is more time for clinicians to work with patients so they don't have to sort of spend a lot of their extra time or time out of those appointments writing notes. Any other comment from patient advocates? Yeah.
I have a question. My name is Julie Raskin, and I am the CEO of Congenital Hyperinsulinism International. And hyperinsulinism is a disease that strikes newborns. And even when the diagnosis is made, in a few days or a few weeks, that can be too late. And that can cause brain damage or even death. So my question is, how can AI be used to make a timely diagnosis so that all newborns and people who have rare diseases and short and long but lethal times to diagnosis, how do we shorten that with AI?
That's a great question, and we'll come back to that during the conversation, I think. And if we don't, please ask it again, because I think it's one of my areas of passion is harnessing AI to minimize misdiagnoses and to mitigate delay in diagnosis. Other question?
Hi, I'm Victoria Falayan from the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI. NAMI is making AI in mental health care a priority from our CMO to our Scientific Advisory Council, because we're seeing, a lot of headlines about AI psychosis and AI indulging people in their, mental illness delusions. Do you guys have are you seeing that as well? Do you have any statements that you want to share around safety and AI? Because we're seeing this across the board in terms of people integrating AI into their mental health care when they don't have access to proper care.
Grace, go ahead, because I think we should probably address that in real time as well.
Thank you so much for your questions. It's certainly something, as a patient advocate and as someone that participates in a lot of different guidelines for AI from a patient perspective, is something that's top of mind for us. That's certainly something that we were going to get into here, but it's really co-creation with patients, involving patient communities, local communities, potentially to participate in, for example, like AI sandboxes, where we're involved in ethically hacking and interrogating these algorithms and tools and solutions to really come up with ways that it's perhaps not safe for our communities to use and how we can improve it. So, building on what you were saying, Eric, that, patients can do more than just learn from AI. We really can build, and there's some really stealth advanced users and communities that are using these, and not just single agents, multiple agents, agentic platforms that are using it to hack their own healthcare and the care of their communities. So thank you so much for your question. We'll definitely get more into that in our conversation.
And I'll just make a comment on the mental health issues. There's a bunch of work, and it's becoming quite a hot topic across the world on psychological influences of AI systems, both the consumer in the wild, as well as what happens with folks that happen to have psychoses that work with these systems. At Microsoft, for example, we have a psychological influences working group on the Ether Committee, which is coming up with recommendations. We hear from outside speakers, like we just had a VA psychiatrist present on what she was seeing in the wild with psychotic patients that come in. Some of them hear, affirmations of some of their wild-eyed thinking, and that makes them it can be troubling. On the other hand, there's also a bunch of work on harnessing AI for mental health and counseling to extend the borders of access to services. The American Academy of Arts and Sciences will be publishing a report in about a month to look for that on that topic. With that, let's get one more up here.
I don't know if you're going to address it now or later, but I want to find out how, when we do have a successful study in AI and health, how we can partner with Microsoft, because we've taken it as far as we can. We need much more cloud computing to be able to move forward. So are you going to be able to talk about how we could work with you as patient advocates who already have a successful published study in mental health and artificial intelligence?
Happy to chat with you, but look at me here as a moderator of a panel today, not as a Microsoft representative. So I'm going to basically, we talk about all the access you can get through various companies and other sources of resource like that. But let's stand by on that. Happy to talk to you afterwards.
Okay, perfect.
So let's get going on this. Let me introduce our panelists today. Next to me, to my left, is Grace Cordovano, who's CEO and board-certified patient advocate, and her organization is called Enlightening Results. Next to her is David Fajgenbaum, co-founder and president of Every Cure. He's also a professor of medicine. Oh, you didn't go. Oh,
We didn't follow rules.
You didn't follow my rules. Okay, I can't see past Grace's beautiful hair over here. So now I'm leaning over here. Okay, jump one. David Fajgenbaum, co-founder and president of EveryCure, also professor of medicine at the University of Pennsylvania. To David's right, and I should say your left, Aaron Mitchell, managing principal R&D excellence at ZS. And now we have to skip over David again. To Dr. Navraj Nagra, associate partner at McKinsey and Company. He's a leader in McKinsey's R&D strategy, portfolio, and AI and transformation practices. And to his left is Sarah Rossetti, associate professor of biomedical informatics and nursing at Columbia University. You can read about each of our distinguished panelists today in the guide. If I took out time to talk about all of their accomplishments, we wouldn't have time for discussion today, probably, or much less. Let's start with reflections from Grace right now.
I think as I look at this with excitement about the possibility of these open access tools that we have, as a patient advocate, as the primary care partner to 2 disabled adults, and as a patient myself, I jumped right on the bandwagon as soon as ChatGPT hit, like many of you, and it has transformed the way I think, the way I brainstorm, and the way that I pursue patient advocacy. I'm able to address so many more barriers, language barriers, gaps in care, think faster, and connect people to the information, tools, and technology that they need to make an informed decision about their care quickly. I have the privilege of serving on a number of different frameworks, including the National Academy of Medicine's AI Code of Conduct project, as well as I'm a co-author of the Light Collective's AI Rights for Patients, and I serve as advisor for the Open Notes AI Lab. AI is a tool that is necessary. I'm concerned that we're building only for physicians and looking at implementation that is relevant to reimbursement pathways within health systems, because conversations about health and decisions about health happen inside the 4 walls of medicine and primarily outside of the 4 walls of medicine. And we need to meet patients and communities in an equitable, safe way as quickly as possible. And the way forward is going to be public-private patient partnership.
Fabulous. Let's now turn things over to Aaron.
Very good. So just as a quick introduction to my company, my role, since most of you probably aren't familiar with us. So ZS is a global professional services firm. We work primarily with life sciences and healthcare companies. And an area where we have a specific focus is in the application of AI and helping our clients do a better job of serving their customers, specifically you all. And so that's my role. Now, as I'm sitting here today, I also am a patient as well. I think I've had a total of 8 surgeries in my life. I've sought care in 5 different countries, from Switzerland to Nepal. Of course, I have parents with a number of different conditions as well. And so what I try to do in my work, what a lot of people at ZS do, is we try to bring in our experiences as patients, as well as the broader experiences of all of you, to the work that we do in AI. I do a lot of interviews, for example, with patients, patient advocates. We collect a lot of data, or we ask for a lot of data from you as well, and we bring that data in to help build algorithms that help our clients make better decisions on your behalf, but also to give you a voice so that when things are created that are going to be put in your hands, they're purpose-built for the needs that you have. And I would say that, if I was going to change the tagline for this summit around this, I would say, no algorithm about me without me. Would be the way we should do it. And I'd probably also do it differently. I'd probably have you sitting up here, and I'd be out there asking you a bunch of questions, because I'm very interested in how we can learn more about you to make sure that AI works for you.
Okay, David.
Thanks so much, Eric. It's awesome to be with everyone. So when I think about this panel and artificial intelligence in general, I think about drug repurposing. That's probably not too surprising for Eric, because I think about drug repurposing in pretty much all contexts. But it's this idea that drugs that exist can treat more diseases than we're currently using them for. And the reason that artificial intelligence is so important for this is that there are 4,000 drugs and there are 18,000 human diseases. And there's no way that any one lab or even teams of labs could ever quantify the likelihood of all of those drugs to treat all of those diseases. I mean, it would take centuries to do that. But artificial intelligence allows us to scale that challenge, which is to look across every drug versus every disease to find the opportunities we have to help patients. And this is a very personal interest for me. I'm also a patient with a disease called Castleman disease and repurposed a drug, sirolimus, that saved my life. And ever since that drug saved my life, all I've been able to think about is how many more drugs are out there that can save more lives. And I think in the context of AI, this is an example where the challenge existed, which is that we've got all these drugs, we've got all these people who are suffering from diseases who could benefit from those drugs, but we didn't have a way to make them matching. So AI is a solution to a problem that existed before AI was around. And I think what I've seen a little bit of over the last few years is a lot of, we've got this AI thing, let's go try to create problems or find solutions for it. And I think that it's really important just to get to the basics of like, we are all here to save and improve lives. And when AI can help us do that better, I think it's a good thing.
Excellent. Navraj.
Thank you all. It's a genuine honor to be here and to have a conversation with you all today. Like everyone else, I think on the panel, I've also been a patient. I've also been on the other side as a physician, being able to, again, having the distinct honor of treating patients and recruiting them into trials to bring the next generation of medicines onto the market. When I think about patients, my head goes very quickly to the space of R&D and how the pharmaceutical industry can help to bring those new medicines to patients. And I also think of 4 numbers. The first number is $1 to $2 billion, which is how much it costs to get a new drug into the market. I think of 10 plus years, which is the average. Maybe it's even actually getting longer to get a drug onto the market. I think of 5%, which is the likelihood of that drug getting to market after invention. And I think of the tiny fraction of patients who are actually getting access into those clinical trials to try those most innovative medicines. In oncology, it's somewhere between 5 and 7%. So I think a big part of the conversation that I'd like to have with you and engage with you on is how can we ensure that AI not only enables us to be more efficient in how we deliver some of these clinical trials, but how it amplifies the voice of a patient so that it is better represented in the space of clinical trials. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, and Sarah.
Great. Good afternoon. When I think of a major opportunity for AI in healthcare, I think of the concept of intuition. Intuition is it drives so many decisions that are made by clinicians and patients within the healthcare system, but it's often dismissed as anecdotal and not scientific. We've actually used AI to model what is often called nurses' intuition, but really I call nurses' expertise. And I think that there are analogies to how this can be used for patient and family expertise as well. And so what we've done is I lead the CONCERN study, where we modeled the behaviors that nurses use in the hospital setting to identify patients' risk of deterioration. So mortality in the hospital, unexpected transfers to the ICU, and sepsis. When a nurse is worried about a patient, they're assessing them more frequently, and they're increasing their interventions. We've been able to model, based on electronic health record data, the nurses' actions of what they're doing and the uncommon times in which they do these when they're concerned about a patient. When we've done that, we've been able to predict deterioration 2 days earlier than other scores that only use vital signs or physiological data. And so what this shows is there is expert knowledge there that's driving this behavior, and we can start to use AI to model it. When we built this into decision support in a multi-site randomized controlled trial, we showed that the use of this predictive model displayed to care teams reduced the risk of inpatient mortality by 35.6% and the risk of sepsis by 7.5%. Now, it worked because it was built by nurses, and it was to model nursing expertise. And so I think there's immense opportunity to think of ways in which we can model patient and family expertise in similar ways. We are building a model for the pediatric setting, and naturally, we're going to be incorporating parent and family expertise into that model, because who better to help with the prediction of a child's risk of deterioration in the hospital setting but their own parents. And so this, to me, is opening up a big area for us to build different, more innovative knowledge bases that we can use to drive decisions.
So what's your name again? Shamika. Shamika. The reason I wanted Sarah on this panel today is because just up the street, this has been implemented in the NYP system. So it's really exciting news, and it's just an example of where things might be going in the future. I wanted to open up to everybody here and just ask for thoughts, and anybody can just jump in here. How might AI technologies be better harnessed to involve patients in healthcare decisions and their overall journey with healthcare?
I'm going to go off script and just revise the question a little bit.
I'm sure you can. I mean,
Why are we starting with how the AI technology can do it? Why aren't we asking patients what their experience is and what tool or what solution might be needed? We keep talking about human in the loop with concern on AI implementation. I think it should be AI in the loop, and it should be people first. Let's listen to the experts in the room. And Sarah, I'm going to build on what you said. You mentioned intuition, and 100% that intuition is very real. Now we build the technology to support that, but patients and their caregivers and their care partners and their advocates have really good intuition too. And when I see that intuition manifest in a point of care setting, we're blown off. Emergency rooms are notorious. Something's not right, something's not right. No, there's something, ma'am, they're fine. The blood pressure's fine. I ran the labs. No, something's not fine. Boom, sepsis. Okay? So how do we bring patients in? And something that's a big problem is, who has a chief patient officer at their organization? Raise your hand. 1, 2. That's not good enough. So we're talking about all of these things. There's no central role in most organizations. That means there's no budget behind it. That means there's no strategy, no mission, no work group, no task force, no collaboration. So patients are doing this in silos. So by implementing AI, we've actually created a silo, and we're not going to be patient-centered. So I challenge everyone, think bigger than just the technology. How can we scale this? We need the people that are the end users to be at the helm.
well, thank you, Grace. Listen, the rest of the panelists, feel free to answer Grace's reformulation or your own version of the question, but this happens to be an AI technology panel, so we are,
I warned them before we went on.
If you wanted, Eric. You guys could switch seats for the panel.
So let's pass to Aaron.
So let's start with the patient. Every year, my company runs it's called a Future of Health survey. We talk to, or we interview hundreds of patients, thousands of patients around the world to try to understand what they're going through and what their needs are. The latest one was kind of interesting for me. There was some interesting statistics that came out. I think one is patients feel less cared for by their healthcare system. So year over year, we actually see that the healthcare systems themselves are performing less well in terms of the patient's perception of how well it cares for them. The second thing is there's a rising perception that healthcare is becoming increasingly inaccessible. So it's performing less well, and I don't have access. And then the third is they increasingly feel that their care is less personalized to their needs. In fact, that's one of the reasons why they feel less cared for. They're being pushed through a system that was built for the average, and you are not the average, right? You are your own special individual, your own person. And so I think this is where, from my perspective, where AI can really play a role. As unintuitive as it may sound, AI offers us a path to make healthcare feel more personalized while also increasing access. And so how does that work? So each patient's story, if you think about it, is hidden in your data. If we can gain access to that data at scale, we can leverage AI to build your story and make sure that story is synthesized in a way that the healthcare professionals working with you understand much more about you and can tailor their approach to you, right? So that's one example. You think about it, we could even go to another level. We can actually use the computational power and the data that you have to build a digital twin of you, a digital twin for which we could think about, based upon you as an individual and your own personal characteristics, what might be the best path forward, and how would we predict that for you rather than using you as your own experiment. And I think the third is, over 60% of patients said they'd be more engaged in their healthcare if they had personalized AI tools. And I think somebody mentioned earlier leveraging, open, basically ChatGPT or Gemini or these publicly available tools for healthcare purposes. I hate to tell you, but those tools weren't designed for that, right? And I think there is a real opportunity here to build validated, verified tools that are built for your specific conditions, leveraging your data and your information to give you the right kinds of recommendations. But the underpinning of all of this is trust. Because if I'm asking you for your data, you have to trust that you're going to get value, and you have to trust that I'm going to deal with it appropriately. Now, what we do see is 50% of patients say they would be happy to provide their data if they were able to get the benefit out of it, and then there was trust. And that's what's missing right now, is that trust. And that's what we have to work on.
Any other comments about that question? We have more questions to come too.
Just share just a quick reflection. As I was hearing this, I was just thinking about, you may remember, I guess 15 or 20 years ago when WebMD first came out, and this is when I was early in my training as a physician, and doctors, when a patient would come in with a printout from WebMD, doctors would gasp, like, oh, it's another WebMD printout, right? And you know, as time went on, doctors started consulting WebMD, and WebMD is actually a source that doctors go to for, you know, how they should treat patients. You know, the most commonly referenced sources by physicians are Wikipedia pages, UpToDate, and Google. So doctors are going to the same places for the most part that we patients are going to. I'm starting to see the same sort of ChatGPT from my colleagues in medicine when someone comes and says, well, have you thought about this? I looked it up on ChatGPT. And I think that, to Grace's point before, it needs to be patient-centric, and we also need to start, you know, pushing on some of these physicians and caregiver or care providers to start sort of, you know, moving with the times as well. And so I think that we can't just say we got to be patient-led. We also got to pull these other folks along too.
Let me just ask, if we just go to the consumer-style chat bot, as the category of technology is called these days, what are some enhancements that we might have in that experience for end users today, given that that's kind of the front you know, door into AI that many people have on their own, these, you know, when they just want to just look something up. Might something be changed in the interface or in store to help the system do better at, for example, appropriate levels of trust and confidence, or listening more precisely to what the situation is before acting and throwing up some conclusions and ideas? I mean, we've all had it. Everybody in medicine that I know has put themselves, either for their own symptomatology, into the shoes of patients to just check out how these systems work. And I think you all probably have some sense for, boy, it's kind of powerful and interesting, but if we just did this better. Any thoughts? Let me ask Grace first, because Grace, you probably have thoughts about this.
I'm trying to give other people a turn. Absolutely.
I'll definitely make sure they have turns.
Absolutely. I think out of the gate, there should be something, a prompt sheet, an introduction, a little video, a hologram, something that pops up that I can easily introduce me to this. What language are we speaking in? What culture? What area of the country are we in? Is this your first rodeo in getting a diagnosis? What about some prompting? I love what Open Evidence does, and when you put in a prompt, it says, hey, have you thought about these questions? So it's not just a one-off question, it's how am I having a conversation, and having conversations is hard. You have to know how to talk to your audience. There's so much we can do to prime, and then there's the experience of within, then there's the cautions that there's hallucinations, that this could be inaccurate. Don't upload your entire medical record. Lot of opportunities, but those are features. Features don't fix the design, co-creation does.
Any other thoughts on that question?
I would actually build on what Grace said, and I think, Grace, you absolutely brought the patient sort of mindset here, and I'm thinking about it also from a systems and design perspective as well. And I think the three things that I would really want to make sure that these more bespoke and targeted models would have is, I think number one has to be safety. There has to be safety built in from the ground up. We have to think about an ethical approach to how these systems are going to be used and applied. And there has to be a role for these systems in the broader context of healthcare. I can have a fantastic AI interface, but if I don't have any follow-up or the ability to engage with the healthcare system more broadly, it's quite limited, the impact of these tools. And I think the other thing that we need to really think about, again, from a systems perspective, is these generative models especially are trained on a very broad set of data, and they're not necessarily using a more specific and bespoke underlying data set that will get me to the right answer. They'll get me an answer. That's their job. They will give you an answer whether it's completely wrong. I saw a fantastic anecdote of somebody who sort of uploaded a file to do some accounting work, and the ChatGPT model threw out some numbers, and he sort of queried it and sort of said, this is a bit weird, these numbers don't seem to make sense, and then asked the model, how did you arrive at these numbers? And it sort of replied, you got me. I didn't open the file yet, but here's the numbers. So I think, we have to really be thinking about the safety and the utility of these tools from a system perspective, but absolutely the interface and the design has to be front and center too.
Any comments, Sarah, about this experience?
Yeah, I'll just, share some comments. I mean, I work at an academic medical center, part of a large health system. And these are the types of things that we're talking about day in and day out. How do we make sure that all of the clinicians understand how these tools work, what they need to be aware of? And there's this concept of clinician vigilance. And I shouldn't even say we're gonna put these tools out there. I mean, they're gonna get these tools and use them however, they can access them. But to teach that clinicians have to be vigilant in what is produced from these systems. And of course, then, that's the same with patients. And how do we train that and teach that is a major challenge. I'll just add that from the clinician perspective, I'm really focused in a large part of my work on reducing clinician documentation burden. And so then when we bring up concepts such as clinician vigilance, we need them to be more vigilant in using these tools. How do we have time for that? And how, can we use AI to offload some burdens so that they can engage at a high level with these tools in the right way? And, I think that when we think of it from a health system perspective, we have some governance structures where we can put trainings out and so forth and have particular tools that we release from an enterprise perspective. Really hard questions to struggle with from a patient perspective when there aren't those kind of, natural scope around it.
So we'll have a chance for Q&A just in a second, unless it's a really urgent question.
It actually is.
Go ahead, please go ahead.
Did a study on this. So
Let's get her a microphone. Thank you.
I mean, this was our study. So this recommendations would be that if it is a medical path that somebody wants to go down in an AI situation, that you would click on a button that now separates you from somebody wanting to know what the latest style is to wear to a prom, right? So you would now go into a portal that would be medically informed. The next thing is that it would be HIPAA compliant, because that's what we did in our study. It was HIPAA compliant. The next thing is that there would be a template so that we take the burden off the patient to have to quickly know how to navigate this system. And so we could provide a basic template, whether that person's looking for research studies or they're looking for protocols or they're looking for drugs or whatever. The next thing in terms of safety would be, a disclaimer and all, so the person's educated to know that there could be hallucinations. And then the next thing is providing research studies that actually speak to so if the person wants to do a deeper dive, they have research studies that are produced based on the question that they're asking. And then the next thing is a list of questions based on what their question was that could summarize it so they can go into their doctor with intelligent questions and make their doctor, their medical team a partner. This is never to replace medical care or to, knock out your medical team. It's to make you intelligent and give you an ability to speak very succinctly and quickly, because you only have 15 minutes with that provider. And that's just a basic summary.
Yeah, those are fantastic. Now, who did that study?
We did it. It was
Who's the we?
So this is kind of funny. I'm a stage 4 cancer survivor with no visible disease for 32 years. And everybody under the sun, including Harvard, Stanford, NCI, everyone, has asked me to come in and speak because they want to understand how I did this when there was no solution and how I've been able to do this with patients on 7 continents. So a woman who was in my audience at Marriott Health Day for 6,000 employees got cancer and asked to give me a grant. And I said, I can't take a grant. I'm just a stage 4 survivor for decades. I'm not a scientist. She goes, you'll figure it out. I had just done something out at JP Morgan with Startup Health, and I interviewed a neuroscientist in 2019 who had created an algorithm. And I asked her when I got the grant, would I be able to use your artificial intelligence to create individual health care plans for stage 3 and stage 4 cancer patients worldwide, and show that digitally we could teach what I did to improve the quality of my life. I can't say I can teach you how to beat stage 4 cancer, but I can say scientifically, because we can study improved quality of life. So the AI was used, AACR published the study, I wrote it in 2019, and the second study they called a new protocol in cancer care, that it is a new protocol, and these were absolutely insignificant monetarily, but the impact was huge. And that's why I said I wanted to talk to you, because the world is asking us to scale. We have a podcast in 138 countries now with people following these procedures. It's 397 daily episodes, 7 days a week, which are just the protocols that we taught that I started to tell you about.
Thank you for that background. Just which question?
So at the Epilepsy Foundation of America, my name is Bernice Lee. I live with epilepsy, and I'm also the CEO. We have built an empathetic AI assistant that follows all of those rules that you just mandated. We've partnered with AWS to build our AI assistant. That one is a closed language model that only scrapes our website, which is monitored by our physician editorial board, as well as patients. It also has all of the guardrails so that it does not produce hallucinations. While that moves the timeliness from about 4 seconds, which you experience with ChatGPT, it is about 26 seconds on our website. Because again, we are making sure that that information is only scraping from our 50,000 pages of curated physician information so that it gives the patient the right answer. But more importantly, the second part that you mentioned is it also gives a list of questions to take back to your care provider so that you can have that intelligent conversation in that 12 to 15 minutes that you spoke about. So again, I encourage other not only Epilepsy Foundation like models, but also all patient advocacy organizations to partner with either a Microsoft or AWS to develop this, because it's really cost effective. As you know, as the time we're living in, federal grants are going away, and many of those are affecting our organizations, particularly our helpline. So how are we going to help more people with less money? And AI for good is the solution. But I want to thank you for those regulations and for coming up with that study, because that's exactly what we're built off of. And if you want to play with Sage, go to epilepsy.com and test them out. And we're really proud of it. But again, for other organizations, it's a really cost-effective way to be able to provide information to your patients that is safe and reliable.
Great. Well, thanks. So, just a change of direction right now. We're going to assume, and this is already happening now, that tools that are built to support clinical decision making, diagnostic decision support, for example, running in support of physicians and nursing units, might become ubiquitous someday. I'm just curious to hear reflections on if, when, and how, if AI is used by your physician, that should be disclosed to the patients versus not. Any thoughts about that question? Grace has an absolutely answer there. Let's go for it.
So I'm going to actually point to a study that was done by the Light Collective. How many people here have heard of the Light Collective? Okay, you have homework. I'm famous for assigning homework, so everyone is going to go home and take a look at the Light Collective website. It's a leading patient rights, digital rights organization, and they published a community-based study. Actually, we have a member of the Light Collective here. Christine, can you stand up for a second? You can ask all of your questions to Christine after this. I encourage everyone to connect. But however, there was a study, a community-based study called Tangled on the Web, and 91% of respondents said they want to know how and when and where and why AI is being used in their care. So if you think for a second that patients don't want to know, I'm just going to point something out. When you walk into the halls of a cancer center, of a hospital, of any healthcare delivery organization, there may be a nice little Bill of Rights slapped on the wall when you're checking in. Take a look at it and read it. I can bet you $1 it does not say anything about the use of AI anywhere because it's outdated. We're not talking about AI. Our physicians are not mentioning it to us. We're now getting introductions because of ambient listening technology. Patients want to know. And I think one of the ways, if I had to suggest a solution, we know that clinical decision support tools are being used and deployed at point of care, and physicians may opt to use that output and may opt to not use it. But I, as a patient, don't know. And I would like to see that as part of the medical record, because information that is used to make decisions about an individual's care or coordination of care technically meets the definition of the designated record set, which means patients have a right of access to it. So I encourage everyone to think about that, because there's a lot of good being done and a lot of positive ways that AI can be celebrated, but patients just don't know about it because it's behind the scenes.
Other comments on that question?
Just to absolutely agree. I mean, without a doubt, it needs to be transparent. I think some of the open questions are exactly how to convey this information. There are times where it may need to be conveyed quickly and succinctly, and other times where, you know, much more detail is needed. And health systems are trying to figure that out. As far as I am aware, most are realizing it has to be full transparency, but patients' voices are needed to figure out how they want to receive that.
On another change of direction, AI is not one thing. Even if we, as consumers, are experiencing it as these chat-like interfaces and so on that we're talking about for the last 10, 15 minutes, there's a whole constellation of impressive technologies. Some are just coming out of the labs. Others have been out for a while but have not really transitioned and diffused into practice. One direction is AI for bioscience, to really uncover, unlock mysteries of health, wellness, and illness. Looking at cellular networks, for example, designing new kinds of therapies through protein design algorithms and so on. I'm going to turn to David now to talk a little bit about what can AI do for rare diseases, and maybe also Navraj and Aaron might have thoughts about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a few different directions that AI can be really powerful. Earlier, diagnosis was brought up, and I think that some of the recent advances in ambient listening, where artificial intelligence is able to listen to your early encounters when you first talk to the nurse, when you walk into the room, when you're first, even the gait, so video, looking at how you walk into the room, being able to start thinking about what the right diagnosis is even before the doctors ever come into the room. I think that's going to be really powerful and important as time goes on. I think you can imagine moving that back to the home, and your Amazon, your Alexa, and your videos in your house are going to pick up those diagnoses early enough to where before you've ever seen a doctor, you're being notified about the rare disease or the condition you have. I think that's coming. I think that's really exciting. The second is that, okay, you can make a diagnosis, but what can you actually do about it to help people? And that's where I'm really, really excited, and that is to utilize AI. And we have a platform at Every Cure where we quantify the likelihood of all 4,000 FDA-approved drugs to treat all 18,000 human diseases. And in doing so, we're able to spotlight and highlight for us humans what looks really promising, because we humans can't look across billions and billions of data points, across tens of millions of biomedical concepts and all the relationships between them. We just can't do that. Artificial intelligence can, and it's not perfect. So our top 1,000 list of drug disease matches that look really promising to AI, they're not all great, and they're not all going to help people. But it's great for our medical team to actually look at a list of 1,000 things that we never would have known to start there. And so when you do that and use AI to scan across so much information to give you the best matches, and so we rank order the 75 million possibilities. Our med team looks at the very top of the list. And then when we look at the top of the list, we find things that are amazing we never even would have thought of. A couple of my favorite recent discoveries and programs that we're advancing, one of them is with a very rare condition called Bachmann-Bupp syndrome, where kids are born with increased levels of an enzyme called ODC1. And as a result of that, they are on feeding tubes and they're hypotonic. They're not able to get out of the bed, and they live a very, very challenging life. But there's a drug that was called DFMO that was made for African sleeping sickness that is a perfect covalent binder to ODC1. And so if you give these kids DFMO early in life, they get their feeding tube taken out. If it's early enough, they can actually sit up, and sometimes they can even walk. This is a condition that has been diagnosed in about 20 kids around the world. There's probably only a few hundred. But when you take this all-versus-all approach, where you're not starting with, is there a drug for this disease, or is there a disease for this drug, but just, are there opportunities out there to help people? And if you just say people and you don't focus in on one disease or one drug, this is the perfect use case for AI to find solutions that are hiding in plain sight.
No, and David and I actually managed to discuss this a little bit yesterday as well. And we were discussing, his company is thinking about established treatments and the opportunity to repurpose, which is fantastic because those are drugs that are already approved and already on market. Some of the work that I do with large pharma companies is thinking about the novel treatments and how can you identify the whole list of patients straight at launch who might get that benefit from that treatment. And AI is fantastic because it can enable you to analyze multimodal data. So you're not just now looking at a single point mutation, but you're looking at the EHR data, wearable data, genomics data, imaging data as well to identify whether that patient's cancer has the mutation that means that they're eligible for one drug versus another, and therefore whether they should be eligible for a trial rather than being put into a trial where maybe they would never destined to be served by that drug. And so being able to personalize and identify those right subpopulations is extremely powerful. And even identifying, are there subpopulations? Are there different ethnic groups who might benefit more from certain drugs versus others? We see this all the time in medicine. There is no one size fits all. And we do need to think about the patient at the end of that drip who's receiving the medicine. I think the other thing that's particularly quite interesting on the AI side, particularly in trials, is using AI for clinical decision support. So ensuring that physicians know that this patient could be eligible for a trial and that they should be able to be brought into it so they have the maximum opportunity. Globally, there's a significant disparity between the types of people, the folks who can get access to some of these most cutting-edge therapies versus those who don't. And even being able to, when a patient is enrolled in a trial, identifying when they're about to go through a toxic event as a side effect of the medicine, when they're not responding to the medicine and therefore should be shifted to a different trial. Again, AI really does enable us to open up some of these opportunities and really be able to better serve the patients who are, frankly, that's the ultimate aim, right, of everything that we do. One last thing is also just thinking about trade-offs. So some people do want to go through a treatment journey. Some people, because they really want to get to the end of that journey and see the end. Others are looking for maintenance treatment because of side effects, et cetera. That every individual patient's journey is unique. What they're looking to get out of their treatment journey is quite different. And being able to think about those trade-offs as you start that journey is, again, something that AI can enable us to do through these patient digital twins and others.
Thank you. Aaron, thoughts?
Yeah, so maybe I'll add to, I'll move out of even though I lead R&D, I'm going to move out of the research and development side since you guys took all the good stuff. And I'll move more in market. No, but there's an old medical adage. I think for those of you that maybe work in rare disease, you've probably heard it. And it's called the zebra rule. And essentially what it says is that when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras, right? And of course, for those of you who don't know, the way it works is that if I'm a practitioner and I have a patient that has come to me with a set of symptoms, the training is that I should be looking for the most common disease that would be reflective of those symptoms. That's the horse. Not for the rare disease, which is the zebra. That all well and good, except we all know that zebras do exist. I've been to Africa. There's a lot of them out there. And some of us are zebras, or some of you might be zebras. And so that adage doesn't work so well for you. And what that leads to is that might lead to many, many years of tests, misdiagnoses, and a very long patient journey to get to the point where you ultimately get the diagnosis and get the treatment you deserve. And so what can AI do? We rolled out an application that we call Zebra. It's very simple. The idea is that, and we did this with UCB. It's a large pharma company based out of Belgium in Europe. And so what Zebra does is we use social media to reach out to a large number of people who, based upon some of the characteristics that they've shown in social media, might be potentially a rare disease patient, specifically myasthenia gravis. And the problem with that disease is that it is a disease where the symptoms are intermittent, and frequently it's misdiagnosed as stress or fatigue, or even some behavioral or psychological issues, and it takes many, many years to ultimately diagnose it. And so the idea is that we'd reach out to them through we'd reach out to a large number of people through social media. Some of them, when we explained to them what they were doing, would actually fill out a questionnaire, relatively simple. And then based upon all the data we collected on them, plus that questionnaire, we would put a probability score against them, and we'd move them to the next stage. And there's just 2 stages that are involved. Ultimately, what it leads to, though, is they agree to provide their EMR data. We get the consent. And then based upon a review of that data by both algorithm and a healthcare practitioner, if they do look like they are an MG patient, we would put them in front of that practitioner. And so I think this is a good example of what AI can do for rare disease, because it is a little bit of a needle in the haystack problem. And unfortunately, you're the needle, and the world is the haystack. And sometimes you just need help to get through that patient journey. And our journeys as patients are just rife with friction. And if AI can just do a little bit to help reduce that friction, it can have a magical effect on someone.
Grace.
I have a comment, and I think of my patients that I have the privilege of serving that are living with metastatic cancer that is not responding to treatment, that is not responding to standard of care. David, I so respect the work that you're doing on repurposing, and Navraj, looking at a target for novel therapies and building on what you said. But there's a component that we're missing here that AI can't fix, but maybe should. And it's a pre-screening step to make sure that all standard of care has been completed on a patient, that they have all the immunohistochemistry that needed to be done, that all of the molecular screening, the genetic screening has been done in testing. If you don't have those records, we're going to miss all of those patients. And you know which patients we're going to miss? All of the patients in our underserved communities, all of the patients that don't have access to the $5,000 to $8,000 screening tests. So there's a role for employers and payers and policymakers to push more. And I would love to see AI deployed on medical records to flag where there's gaps in standard of care, fill that in to make sure no patient is missed, then hand it over to these AI platforms, because that's where the richness is going to come in. Because right now we're seeing the same thing with clinical trials. Well, this patient didn't match to a trial. Well, they're missing the basic immunohistochemistry. They didn't have their biopsy test run. They were dropped.
Oh, interesting.
So I'd love to see that sort of pre-screening step prior to AI.
And just to think about the terrain right now, there are so many applications in healthcare on the consumer and clinical and scientific side. For example, Grace just said, what about finding gaps and doing flags of various kinds to make sure that the best practices are being followed? I'll just throw out one example of another use case. How many people here are familiar with tumor board meetings? And those typically are, some of the most complex decision-making goes on with multi-specialties sitting in a room or on Zoom these days or Teams, thinking through, give me what the pathologist said. What does the oncologist say? What does the surgeon have to say? What does the radiation oncologist say about the case? How about the patient and their family on the trade-offs? These are complicated cases, and they're not available. Tumor board meetings are not typically available in underserved areas. So a project at Microsoft, in conjunction with Stanford University and a few other places, is to harness AI to automatically read through all the patient encounters in a case, go back in history, look at all the therapies and failures and successes and breakthroughs of the tumor to the latest therapy, for example, and create a readable, digestible, shareable corpus with all the information coming from different specialties, and then helping to build out a decision tree to help with the conversations, all to help set up and reduce the cost and to expand the efficacy of the tumor board meeting itself. That's a task that's really aligned beautifully with the latest vision and language-based multimodal language models to look at the timeline and compress it and bring that to physicians. Let me But just keep in mind, there's a broad terrain here. And I'd love to spend time just talking about, for example, how recent antibiotics that address antibiotic-resistant bacteria were discovered through AI and how that all works. What's the pipeline like, because it applies to many therapies. But I want to go back to kind of maybe a more psychologically oriented question, which is, we hear stories about, and studies, formal studies that are even reported widely, that AI systems show as much empathy or more empathy than physicians. How do you all feel about AI showing empathy and the upsides and downsides of that when it comes to patient engagement with AI systems?
I definitely see the pros of having empathy when there's a lot of cold, abrupt interactions and encounters. I was a cancer misdiagnosis patient. I did not get along well with my thoracic surgeon. She did not welcome any questions, but I did move forward with her care. But I remember that personally being a big problem. It can be misleading, though. If you're a patient that doesn't have anyone listening to you and there's this kind, compassionate, you're going to believe anything if you don't have the guardrails and training. So there's a balance here in educational. So with transparency and proactive education, I'm okay with someone being a kind, a tool to me. Or you can adjust it and customize it to speak like a New Yorker, maybe, or whatever works.
Like a taxi driver,
personalizing, right?
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. So I think ask the patients, but I think we need to be informed and be doing more on the education side.
Other comments on that topic?
I think it illuminates a certain problem we have, certainly in healthcare. And to reflect on the fact that our clinicians don't have much time. It's not an excuse, but it is a reality. AI can, has some potential to help with that, but AI can help offload burdens, right, and automate tasks. And we really are hopeful for that in healthcare. We need it in healthcare. We expect patients to pick up some of the inefficiencies of the system, right? So some of that offloading is things that patients shouldn't have to do, and some of it is that clinicians shouldn't have to do. What I do end up worrying about with that, though, is that we don't just automate broken pieces of the system, too, though. So we have to consider that. But in terms of what I think about day in and day out with the potential for AI, around this issue of empathy really is, as we offload some tasks for clinicians, we cannot fill their time again with more tasks, because that has happened over the past several decades. Every time we have some new sort of inefficiency. At the end of the day, that impacts our patients.
We're getting close to time, and I want to leave a few minutes for the audience Q&A, but I want to ask each of you just to envision that things go really well with AI despite concerns and despite current gaps and preliminary rough edges, we'll call it. Where could things be in 5 years and 10 years? Really quickly, each of you. Go, Grace.
The fax machine is in a museum. We're no longer using CDs, and we have a digitized, non-clipboard ecosystem that AI is a tool that enhances our care.
Excellent, Aaron.
I'm not sure if I can beat that one. Get rid of the fax machine. I actually think that if AI, for me, if AI is a twin of myself, it's somebody I can consult with, it's somebody can console me, it plays a role in my life, even if it isn't actually a human. I think we lack empathy in this world, and if there's AI providing some level of empathy, I'll take it.
David.
I think that it's a world where hundreds of diseases that are currently untreated are able to be treated with the drugs that we already have, and millions of lives are saved.
Navraj.
I think echoing that, AI enables us to get the right patients, the right medicines at the right time, and enables us to put more of the human side of healthcare back into the system.
And Sarah.
AI allows for us to learn some of the expertise of clinicians and patients that we couldn't learn before, and to really support their actual relationships, so that AI is in the background capturing what it needs to capture, but so that those conversations can really happen.
Thank you so much. A few questions from the audience. We have a bunch of questions. Let's see if we can get to a few of them. So go first, right here, yeah. We have runners with mics.
Hi, Marianne Risk. I thoroughly enjoyed this panel, so thank you all. I think creating compassionate use of data should be a requirement. Coming from health, there was a lot of your colleagues were talking how we actually believe that trust is considered a clinical feature because there is an absolute necessity to think about the ethical use of data, the transparency of the data, making sure that the algorithms or agents that are being built are unbiased. And so with the point about making sure you're giving transparency and visibility to the patient, yes, they should know. If you want a concierge experience to just be able to talk through your symptoms, yes, right, that should be a feature that we design. And just, a reminder to all of us, these agentic activities are ways that we can shape, like our fingerprints are the blueprints. And I guess the question I have is, how do you view trust as a clinical feature? Because I think we get to be programming and training the models on how it should perform for us. And I just think it's an exciting time for patients because we now have new tools that can give us new access to care or services.
Great. I thoroughly enjoyed what you just said, but we have to let's go
going?
shorter
Okay.
very quickly here. So quick questions or comments. Yeah, thanks. And I did thoroughly enjoy that, by the way.
Thank you very much for all the information that you share. I'm trying to see at AI at this other level in which we touch the intersection between intuition and science in a group that I'm working with. And it's that PhD students or other academics have also experienced growing up with a condition or a sibling with a condition. And we want to use AI more in terms of the science to test. We have identified a couple of features that we think are important for the efficiency of the clinical trials. So there's no interaction between the patient and the AI. The AI is just collecting this information. Do you see that happening? Do you see that data being collected at clinical trials with no input from the patient whatsoever? And how do you think that could be modeled?
Well, I think capturing outcome data as well as even logs of engagement will be very critically important in the long term. It'd be nice to do that in a HIPAA-compliant way, and to figure out a way to share experiences. And I could tell lots of stories about what's seen in ethics-approved studies of healthcare searches in the old days of search online, with looking at logs. I mean, people would enter their whole pathology reports, and it's amazing, but there's no very often there's no formal mechanism for the capture, so it's a really good point.
Hello. My name is Monique.
Where are you?
I'm back here
Okay.
to the left.
Thanks.
My name is Monique. I am a global lupus
Voice of God
advocate.
appeared in the ceiling.
That's okay. Yeah, there's a whole room of people over here.
Behind that big column.
In addition to being a global lupus patient advocate and a women's health advocate, I'm also a patient experience researcher. Because I do a lot of work in the clinical research space, I just think there's a missed opportunity, and Grace, you were alluding to it. AI has the opportunity to be an equalizer in health equity. And I don't want us to understate or skip past this. We speak about different individuals. Patients are not homogenous. There's a prime opportunity, and my question is, how are we utilizing and integrating and collaborating with these underrepresented groups? They're different groups, they're different identities, different backgrounds, different cultures, and unfortunately, we've been grouping them all in one in our conversations. Secondly, we haven't spoken directly to the promises and the innovation that we've seen in collaborating with these groups. So I'd love for you to talk about that. How have you mitigated biases? How have you ensured transparency, specifically with these underrepresented groups that systemically have been left out of the process?
Comment?
Thank you so much for your question. I don't have all the answers, but I will celebrate the work of the Health Foundation's Tequity Coalition. I'd love to talk to you more after that and introduce it, but they are absolutely leading the charge on exactly what you're doing, and I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards.
And let me just throw out just a concept here. 10 years ago, we built models to do prediction at a Washington, D.C. hospital, intensive models, predicting which patients would become infected in 48 hours on the floor. Which patients would bounce back within 30 days and so on. And you run these models, and the AI system told us, here are the features that are most important. You get a whole list, right? Well, zip code and race were strong predictors. Yeah, and some people say, well, leave those out, and the system should be blind to that because they'll make them more fair, and it's not the case. We need to sort of have those variables in the system so people at greater risk or have different predictions because of their background and long-term inequities, can benefit from those systems, and AI can help us to identify those things. Yeah, go ahead. Who has the mic now? Okay,
I have one, and I think there's one over there. Yeah.
Okay, first here.
I'll be quick because I'm dovetailing a little bit off of Monique. So thank you for that. I've had the privilege of hearing different pharma companies talk about how they're using AI. I lead our public affairs team at Sanofi. We talk a lot about generative AI. Patients don't always want to be represented by generative AI, and they want their perspective, their person, their lived experience to be what you're considering. And I'm wondering if you could just opine a little bit on where the right spot is to make sure that we are representing patients as who they really are and not taking away an opportunity for them to be advocates for their own community because it's faster, easier, and sometimes even better to do AI.
Who on the panel understood that question the best? Grace, did you understand?
I'm going to double down on your question and say we need a chief patient officer that's partnered with local communities, regional, state, national, and at the federal level, and then internationally and globally, and on capturing the culture and the nuance of locations. We don't have that, which means there's no budget, which means it's not happening, which means patients are doing it on their own volunteer work. This is not volunteer work. This is business strategy. That's the difference. So the sooner people recognize it, the quicker we can get there.
Over here, yeah.
So I have a quick comment. I have my concerns about using social media for recruiting and the digital footprint that we're leaving behind as we do that. Full transparency, I co-authored the AI Rights Initiative with Grace. I also taught AI courses for hospitalists and physicians in Chegg Learning. And so I think AI offers incredible hope for patients, especially those of us with rare disease. I'm going on 50 years, no real diagnosis yet. But my question is this: how do we ensure that this hope is matched by strong protections for privacy and security without bias? And just as importantly, how do we equip patients and advocacy groups to use AI safely and meaningfully in their own care without adding more garbage into the whole mix?
Well, I think several people addressed that during those questions during the panel, but we didn't get really too deeply engaged with privacy today and trust with what happens to your data. Any comments on that? And Grace here, I'm sure I'd love to give you the mic. I'm sure you have a lot to say about that. Aaron?
Yeah, so by the way, some of these questions deserve their own panel, I would say. So I feel remiss trying to answer a question like that or the diversity one in one quick quip. I think that the privacy and trust is a key issue. We have not figured it out yet. The foundational issue we have right now is that most of the AI progress that's happening today are with technology companies. They do not have a lot of experience in healthcare. They don't understand patient data, healthcare data, concept of informed consent, and so forth. Even if you look at the way that they're building the LLMs, and they're actually working across the internet without necessarily having rights to all the data, right? All that's being worked out. So with that being said, this is a gap. I don't have an answer, right? But we do need to have the right guidelines or regulation, not state by state, but federal. We also need to have the industry and the people in this room coming together, as we already talked about today, providing those guidelines, providing what you want, what you're asking for, so that it's very clear. So I don't think it's the answer, but I think it's at least we're hopefully making some progress.
Yeah. Grace, any other comments about that? Briefly.
Read the AI Rights for Patients document and then follow up with questions. I'm happy to answer any and all.
Great. Let's go ahead.
Yes, a quick question, though. So I've worked in the healthcare for 30 years with all the clinical trials, input in, input out, with the protocols. It's all directed one way. Now I also jumped into the biome, the well-being, the microbiome, the multiomics, and then expanding out to internationally. What's happening is this intersections is not there, so patients don't have EMR, EHR that connects with the hospital systems, with the practitioners that know what's happening, and the EHR is the ownership is from the patient himself, so they'll know back and forth. What are you doing about it from a corporate standpoint?
Okay, so we're going to let that stand as a statement because I just saw actually this sign just now. Yeah, that means the cane is coming. Thanks to everybody. Thanks to my panelists. Thanks to the audience and the patient representatives. Fabulous. Thanks so much.